to look at what Australia has to gain and lose from this 10-day summit season in the Asian region. I'm joined now by former DFAT Australia-China Council scholar and China business expert Andrew Phelan, who's in Melbourne. Andrew, thank you very much for your time. What was the Prime Minister thinking running around on Friday before he boarded a plane saying, we want China to lift the sanctions, that's what we'll do and that's how we'll have a meeting? No wonder he's off the list.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris. I think Australia's baseline position is fairly well understood. But given the background or the prelude to this meeting, the fact that there's no particular agenda, there's no particular goals set, then I would have advised Mr Albanese to keep his cards close to his chest and really just to say, yeah, if there's a meeting organised, we'll talk. We're happy to talk and leave it at that. So I'm not sure if he's setting a precondition. The meeting still might happen. But I think we also have to remember that, Don Farrell was snubbed when he wanted to talk about trade with his Chinese counterpart in Switzerland. And, for China, they've got probably bigger fish to fry in terms of the Xi-Biden meeting, as you mentioned, which is probably going to hijack the G20 to a certain extent, given its importance. Meeting with the African Union chief is important for China as well. We don't have time to talk about that. But he might still get a meeting. Hopefully he does. And hopefully it's positive. But let's wait and see.
Well, the seat arrangements enabled him to be within talking distance of the Premier, but that wasn't too long for a meeting, was it?
Well, Li Keqiang's on the way out as a result of the last 20th Party Congress. And Li Keqiang has a reputation as being affable, more pragmatic, somewhat falling out with Xi over macroeconomic policy and other issues. So, Catherine Murphy described it as a significant breakthrough. It's not. It's a little sidebar chat at the side of a meeting, but, it's welcome.
Tell me, Australia didn't always have a seat at some of these meetings and these summits and these organisations, but we have things to gain, do we not?
We certainly do. It's summit season. It's a sort of summit overload at the moment, and there's quite a bit of overlap between some of these summits. So, Australia's a member of APEC, which was pioneered and championed by Hawke and Keating. At the same time, in around 2004, 2005, the East Asian Caucus started. That was championed by Mahathir of Malaysia. He didn't want Australia and New Zealand in that group. He wanted an Asian-only grouping. And since then, those two bodies have had a lot of overlap. China behind the scenes has been trying to undermine US interests in Asia. They want the US out of Asia. And so, and in addition to that, we have the ASEAN meeting, which has its own issues at the moment dealing with Myanmar. Indonesia wants to take a stronger stance, pushing back against Myanmar. China's remaining mum on that issue. It sees Myanmar as a strategic asset to China, and it gives it a land-based route to the Bay of Bengal so that it can get around potential energy choke points in the Malacca Strait. So there's quite a bit of overlap. But one thing that the new Labor government's talked about quite a bit is ASEAN centrality, doing more with ASEAN, which is a population of 600 million. I lived in ASEAN for 15 years. I've done business in all those markets. That's going to be easier said than done. Those separate markets are quite protectionist, and intra-ASEAN trade is much less than what we see, say, in the European Union, for example.
All eyes will no doubt be on this meeting that may take place as early as tonight between Joe Biden and Xi Jinping, the first time for 2 years, and tensions have been growing over a possible military operation to invade Taiwan. It will be very interesting where they both stand.
Yeah, I guess they'll have a one-on-one meeting, but they'll also meet with their respective security teams. It's certainly very much anticipated, given that Biden has said specifically and confirmed in various fora that the United States would intervene militarily in the event that the PLA made an attack on Taiwan. So that will be the central issue in the relationship, the thorn in the side of the relationship. It's not the only one, but it's certainly the main issue, and that's where the attention will be focused. It's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out. There were a few Latin American countries fringing the Pacific in APEC Colombia wasn't one of them. So I hope Joe Biden's on the ball in that meeting.
Penny Wong was a long way from Cambodia today. She was in Blacktown in Sydney's West delivering the Whitlam oration. Here's part of what she said on our relationship with China.
While countries in the region do not want to submit to a hegemonic power, they have also been clear that they do not seek to pick sides in a geostrategic contest, and insisting they do only risks re-enlivening colonial resentments to our detriment.
It's interesting. I think Penny Wong's done a really good job in reference to China, and in particular talking about the fact that China has changed its attitude. It's become very aggressive. It's become very engaging with Pacific nations that it has previously ignored. And that can only lead to one thing, Andrew. We can't be fooled by what they're up to, can we?
Well, I think Penny Wong makes a great point about ASEAN hedging its bets in this great superpower competition. I'm not sure the reference on colonialism makes a lot of sense there, but she has a point there. But I think the Labor Party have kind of clung a little bit like a holy grail to this 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations and Gough Whitlam blazing a trail going up to Beijing 50 plus years ago. And I think they tend to overdo that. I think what they ought to do, and members of government at all three tiers in both parties, what they ought to do is have a read of Alex Joski's new book, which goes into detail about how Bob Hawke, who of course criticised the Tiananmen massacre, was then invited back to effectively become a brand ambassador for China by some think tankers who were actually MSS agents who duped Hawke into effectively working for China. So I think that sort of says that, you know, we need to have our wits about us and really understand how China negotiates, how they play the influence game.
Yeah, and that was in the 90s. We're now in 2022. They do it twice as well, as you know. Andrew Phelan, thank you very much for your time.